Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for making it here today at the Extreme Hangout venue at COP27. We have a wonderful panel in collaboration with One Young World ambassadors and former president of Colombia. So, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce From Politics to the Private Sector Building Bridges in the Fight Against Climate Change with Shuruk Abuzaruk, Abdelraham Fani, Mavis Mainu, Oliver Risch, and former president of Colombia, Ivan Duque. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Carmen. And it's a great honor for me to be here in this extreme hangout. Definitely, I also have to say that this is the most beautiful and maybe the coolest venue in COP27. So this represents that youth is here, is present, and it is a real open space to have debates and analysis and so on and so forth. I am very honored to be here with such an amazing group of leaders, young leaders, that have done so much at their young age. So Mavis, thank you so much. It's great to be here with you. You come from Ghana and you have done tremendous activism and made change connecting education with equality, but you're also using that platform to generate climate action by the youth in your country. So it's a great honor, and it's great to see all that you're doing also in Africa. I want to welcome Oliver. Oliver, it's great to see you. You come from London. You live here now in Egypt, and you come from the legal world. So that makes me happy because I'm not the only lawyer here in this panel. So I have to say that it's great to be with a young lawyer who has devoted so much energy connecting legal studies and legal thoughts to the needs of humanity, and also thinking about climate action. And I'm going to today pick your brains on many issues. One of them, we're going to talk about climate refugees and climate migration, which is going to be a big issue in the decades to come. So it's great to be here with you. Sharouk, thank you to see you, and you come from Jordan. I know you have done a lot of activism, and you have been a trigger of volunteering on many issues. And now you have all these thoughts also on how to mobilize youth for climate action. So we're going to talk about that as well. And Fami, I should say Fami, I asked you many times how should I pronounce your name, so it was so long, and you say, just keep it simple. Call me Fami. Fami, you're an entrepreneur. You said something that I admired, and is your perseverance connecting with the One Young World, because you had applied many years to get to this program, and you're here. And I have to say that it's really impactful what you do as an entrepreneur. And I like your vision that you have expressed on how entrepreneurship can be an instrument for the sake of climate action. So, ladies and gentlemen, with such a great panel, let me begin. And let me start with you, Mavis. So, tell me a little bit about your idea of connecting the dots between education, science, climate action, but talking about inclusion, combining those three dots. And if I may add to the question, how do you think those three dots connected are going to make an impact in your country, in Africa, and in the rest of the world when it comes to climate action?
Thank you very much for the question. And first and foremost, I want to give a great shout out to our Stream Hangout and all of the partners for providing this amazing space for young people to engage in this very important conversation. And Mr. President, it's an honor to share this space with you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. So on climate science, education, inclusivity, and how all of these come together. First on climate science, so I work with the Climate Science Research Institute, Climate Analytics, and what we do is that we perform a lot of assessments on 1.5 pathway assessment. How are we doing? How are countries' actions and policies aligned with the Paris Agreement goal, which is 1.5? And this is really important because we need to put the science and the facts out there, and we need to know where we are heading. And without the science, we do not get this. So this is the importance of the science. Now, once we have that fact and the information, how do we send that information down? And that is through education. So what we are doing, or what I'm doing in Ghana with education, is educating all of these young people about climate change so they understand what is happening to our world that is not just a coincidence, it's actually something that is happening. It's actually climate change that is happening. And with this knowledge and with this information, they are then able to engage in action. So they are able to contribute to the solutions that we need to solve the crisis that we are currently experiencing. And inclusivity also comes from there. Once they have this knowledge, they have this information, and they are empowered, this is how they are able to engage, and they are able to be engaged in the policy making processes and also be ambassadors for change in the climate change conversation that is happening. So this is how all of these dots connect together to make sure that as young people we are empowered and we have the facts and the science and we have the knowledge that we need to push governments and business leaders to act on the crisis that is happening. And just to add that recently I've been really not having a lot of good sleep because I wake up and there's always like one disaster happening here and there, and we know that all of these things are not happening in vacuum. There's a climate change that is happening, and I worry about my future as a young person, and not just my future, also for the younger people who are my kids, for example. I don't have kids yet, but I also worry about what their future will look like. So I think this is why, for me, it's so important that we include young people in this conversation and bring in the facts and the science and the education and the inclusion of young people together to make sure that we are driving the change that is needed.
Thank you. Well, that was a tremendous answer, and congratulations, Mavis. So, Oliver, when we talk about the legal world, I'm also a lawyer by training, and when you're a young lawyer, like you always get this question: Are you a lawyer? And people like always have this dual sentiment that they want you close, but they don't want you that close, right? I'm just teasing. I've suffered it in the past. But you said something that is very important. Regulation matters for climate action, and you are 33. You're a brilliant lawyer who has taken sometimes steps of having your own personal retreats and your own sabbaticals and think about what can the legal world do to address climate change, but also how to empower youngsters to think about legal solutions that are quite needed. So I'm going to put you two questions together. One that I know you would love to speak, which is, how do you think the world can react in a rule of law system, in a fraternal way, to what is going to be the triggering of climate migration in the years to come? But the second one is also, do you think there has to be more regulation or less regulation when the world designs market-driven, nature-based solutions that can connect the dots of communities and the private sector and the need to reduce emissions? So I'll leave you with.
Oh, you have the choice. You have the choice. Thank you so. Is this on? Thank you so much. I think I'll try this one. Much better. Well, thank you, first of all, One Young World, for hosting me here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be speaking here with you, Mr. President. Thank you very much for having me. And yes, first of all, I get this question and this reaction a lot. Are you a lawyer? And if so, what do you do? And based on that, people decide whether to engage with me further or not. I think it's very important that we use COP not just from a political sphere, but a legal sphere, because at the end of the day, rule of law is what anchors our agreements. It is the very backbone of our agreements. It's very important that we start thinking about, you touched upon it, climate migration. The NGO that I'm representing here is Carré Géo et Environnement, which is a French-Kenyan NGO that focuses on climate change, but also migration with a particular focus on climate migration. And for those who are not aware, currently there are no legal ramifications to back legal climate migration, which means that if you have people fleeing from climate disasters to, for example, Europe, they are not officially legally represented under the Geneva Convention, which recognizes refugees such as, fleeing from persecution, hatred, war crimes, etc. But there's no such thing so far with regards to the environment. And this is something that I believe is missing. This is something that the rule of law has the ability to tackle and also has the necessity to tackle, because climate change, we all know this by now, is real, it is happening, it is already impacting millions of people around the world. People are fleeing or have to flee their homes, their livelihoods are at risk, and they do not have the legal ramifications to provide them with potentially a new home. So this is something that I believe that world leaders and young leaders need to sit down and tackle. With regards to your second question as to regulation, yes, regulation is important. At the end of the day, we are experiencing climate change on a daily basis, and without a proper, a thorough rule of law, we are not going to be able to halt it. If we do not have regulated markets, this is going to have pretty disastrous effects for populations at large, and therefore I believe that regulation is very important.
Well, thank you so much, Oliver. That's also a great response. Congratulations. Shahrukh, so we talked about, before we came to the panel, about thoughts you have, reflections you have, and you also wanted me to invite you to tell a story, and that's the compelling story of how do you think climate action from the youth standpoint can be effective. And the reason why I ask this is because, yes, we come to the COPs. It's a great venue to discuss about the future of the planet, but we don't see major agreements among the superpowers that have triggered the climate crisis we face. So how not to lose faith, trust, and enthusiasm about the youth compromise, even though the superpowers are not taking it as seriously as we expect they do. And we can clearly say, because maybe they didn't come here to Sharm el-Sheikh with big announcements or big solutions. But what also I loved about meeting you and meeting you all is that you still have that drive, that passion, and you say, well, it doesn't matter if they don't get to an agreement yet, we will continue to put pressure, we will continue to raise our voice. So tell us about that idea, and also in the way that you locally in Jordan have also, through the organizations that you participate, be able to keep on mobilizing youth for climate action.
Thank you so much for this question, and thank you for this space to allow us to have this type of conversations. I work currently with Mercy Corps, which is a global organization, and in Jordan we are working on building climate resilience at community level. So youth play a very important role in that, because as youth we are all feeling like we need to protect our future. We need to work to put pressure on the decision makers now to act promptly to address climate change. I've been working with the vulnerable communities who have struggled with the effects and the impacts of climate change to try and have them keep up the faith and actually actively engage in climate action. Because it's important to focus on the adaptation measures on ground where people are actually living those impacts. So this is one of the things that keeps me motivated each day, just to work more on pushing for all countries and all actors, not just countries, private sector, NGOs, governments, to fulfill the commitments that are already there. We don't want COP to come up with the new commitments. We just need you to mobilize and act fast on the commitments that you have already pledged before under Paris Agreement and different articles. So it's very important to bring the element of the local communities and to contextualize the implementation of climate action, because each community suffers different things. It's not the same in all countries, it's not the same in all context in local level. So that's why it's important to engage even the youth in the communities through volunteering and through sharing the knowledge with them and building their awareness about what's happening in the world and how do they fit in with this bigger agenda, this bigger climate action. So that's basically what drives me.
Well, I
Thank
think
you.
that's another great response. Also, I ask for a big round of applause here, and brings me to Fami, because Fami is the businessman here in this group, and you're an entrepreneur, but you also have a social drive, and I tasted that when we had the conversation, when we talked previously, but I also saw in the way that you wanted to connect the dots with your mates here in this panel. So a lot of people sometimes are a little bit reluctant to believe that from a business standpoint, you really have an environmental compromise. A lot of people today in the world think about greenwashing, or people think that business, when they get involved in the environment, is just to get more attention, to get more clients. But you demonstrate that, yeah, those things could happen, but there's a major drive in the private sector worldwide where new entrepreneurs and even companies are changing themselves to a full commitment on the environment. So why don't you tell us, from your standpoint, how is it possible to do well for humanity and do good from a business standpoint and contribute to the climate action? And also, just briefly, because I love the perseverance story of your life. How long did it took you to get to this event in One Young World? And I love that you said, I keep on presenting me until I was selected. And I have to say, for the people that are watching this online, we have more than 60,000 young leaders around the world who are presenting themselves to be selected for this panel. So in fact that you're here is just a big demonstration of the big achievements that you have made. So Fami, the word is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and welcome you all to Egypt. So yeah, as you said, business needs persistence, and actually, as we've seen over the last decades, entrepreneurs were the bottom-up approach to disrupt economies across communication, across media, across transportation. And I do believe that the future of economies in climate change, or the future of countries in climate change, will be disrupted by businesses and startups. So the same way that communication is now different than 10 years ago, or transportation, or even energy, climate change, it's a bottom-up approach. So rather than relying on regulations or policies, which is important, however, entrepreneurship and businesses, and thinking differently from a perspective that it's not only about being a market-driven, but it also relates to how to connect with the stakeholders, the social communities around your value chain as a business, but also the environment around you. Those will be the future of how business thinks. And as we see right now, a lot of corporates worldwide, even the oil and gas corporates, they started to think that way. How we can be much more inclusive to other communities. How we could be much more aware about environmental impact, but also sustain our existence in this environment. Businesses, we have seen, for example, the mitigation actions like the renewable energy or the transportation, they have received a lot of investments like Tesla or whatever. However, also something that I want to highlight is the adaptation technology and the resilience technology. Adaptation is not an investable case on its own. However, to make sure that our infrastructure is resilient enough and adaptive enough to what's going to happen in the upcoming years, this is something to secure our economy. So it's business security rather than business investments. However, it's very essential for the investments. So as you all know, also for those people who have been attending lots of COPs, before Paris Agreement, the private sector wasn't engaged that much. However, currently, as we see right now, hundreds of corporates sending their teams there. This is actually gives me a little bit hope, because those people have the willingness and they have the power to change. They have the funds, they have the creative minds to change our situation. This is what I believe, actually. And this doesn't deteriorate the role of governments or role of NGOs. However, it completes it and it accelerates the action. So this is what I have been also trying to do, and I've been working in the Egyptian market since 9 years. So this is maybe the time it took me to get to One Young Word.
Wow. Another applause, man. That's amazing.
Yeah. But really, on another note, connecting with One Young Word gave me a lot of value, and I was in Manchester for the first summit, and hopefully not the last summit. But also to be with you all guys here today, it's such a pleasure, and I look forward to a lot of such opportunities.
Good. So I know that always time in this kind of panels is it's a pressure. So I'm going to start using the Proust test of short questions, so I need short answers but precise answers. So I'm going to start asking you, and I'll begin with you, Fami, so we go back. One solution. One solution. Think of one solution from what you're doing as a businessman that can have an impact on climate action in your country, but that can be replicable elsewhere. So I'll ask those questions, and you'll have a minute so we can take more questions and try to get the panel more heavily activated on responses. So go ahead.
Yeah. Smart agriculture and irrigation. This is something, it's very important for my country and other countries as well. Smart agriculture not only utilizes water, not only makes or enhances food security, but in other places of the world, it helps minimizing deforestation, or also uncontrolled agriculture activities. So I think what's urgent for our local economy, but maybe also the regional economy in Africa, is new smart solutions for agriculture, utilizing water and wastewater, and protecting our crops. We had a major issue last year in mangoes and olives. Actually, both crops were damaged by heat waves. So I think this is one of the major solutions that we as a region have to focus on, and I'm happy and proud that we have already supported a couple of entrepreneurs working in this sector as well. So
smart, low-carbon agriculture. Sharouk, one solution from your own perspective.
I would say empowering local communities to have the ability to advocate for their needs and for improved policies at their local level, national level, and even international level. Because what's better than the vulnerable people who are facing the effects to understand the needs and to actually prioritize those needs. So what we need is to actually empower them, engage them in the discussion, and to enable the environment for them to do that.
Good. Oliver, one minute, one action.
Excellent. Besides legalizing or adding to the legalization of climate refugees, I highly recommend also having a legal structure in place for young leaders to be a part of the decision-making process. Right now, you can be a COB, you can be in local municipalities, but I would like to see laws, both national and international laws, for young people to have a seat at the decision-making table, not just the possibility, but making that a legal requirement, because at the end of the day, it's young people, and I mean people that are much younger than us, that are going to face the brunt of climate change.
Thank you, Oliver. Mavis, one solution.
And to add to everything they have said, I would say the money needs to flow, especially in renewable energy technologies. And we know that the money is there because we saw what happened during COVID. Governments were able, governments were able to find money wherever it was to introduce all these vaccinations and to make sure that we recover from the losses that we experienced during the economic losses during the COVID period. So I think we are not seeing a lot of financial flows into climate solutions, and most of the flows also goes into mitigation as opposed to adaptation. And from my background, from a developing country, it's adaptation. We need to adapt to some of the most of the impacts that we are experiencing, which was not caused by us. So I think that the money is where the issue is, and I'm really happy with the points that you made with the private sector engagement, because this is not something for only government or the public sector to do. This would need collaboration between the private and the public sectors to make sure that the money that is needed to flow into all of these like renewable energy solutions that is needed to help both for us to mitigate and also to adapt to the changes that we are already seeing in the planet.
Thank you, Mavis. So, continuing with the Proust test, let me ask you. I'm going to get more personal here. So, we all preach about doing something for the planet, for the climate action. But I want to ask you, what is it that you do on a personal scale, in the way you consume, in the way you act, in the way you work, that you think is a good counsel for the rest of the young leaders around the world, for the rest of society? So I'll begin with you, Shahrukh. Is it the bulbs you use at home? Is it the cars? Is it the bikes? What is it that you do in your personal life that gives you congruence on the campaign that you're leading to get climate action from the youth?
Well, I have an electric car, if that counts. So, yes, this is one of the major shifts in my life when I became more activist in the climate change world. I changed my car to electric, and I'm more aware of how we are around the house utilizing energy. Because this is something that should be done at each household level, and it's our own responsibility to do it. So being aware about the consumption on an individual level does make a difference eventually.
Fahmi, one thing that you do in your daily life that is congruent with what you're doing on climate action?
An electric car, unfortunately. But
that's a good idea, right? It's a good idea, right?
Yeah, it's really a good idea. Yeah. They're a little bit more expensive here, but the one thing that I really take care about, because also I'm coming from a circular economy background, is the consumption and the way I segregate my waste. So I pay very good attention to the usage of plastic bottles, whether multi-usage or single use, and I also encourage the circles behind me, whether my colleagues or family, to pay a lot of attention to our consumption rates. This is something that I do, and also the segregation. So we don't need, as a local community here, to segregate like, for example, Germany do, but at least segregate organic and non-organic. This will make life easier for the waste collectors, and also will decrease a lot of contamination and value. So this is something that I do, but hopefully I'm planning to have an electric vehicle.
I see EVs and reduce, recycle. Yeah. So Mavis, one thing that you do on your personal life that gives congruence to what you're preaching in climate action?
Yeah. So a lot of my friends know me that when you're having parties and I'm attending, you're not having anything plastic. So the cups that we're using for the party, the spoons, the fork, no plastic. And they really know me for that. So I think if I can pinpoint one thing that I really do is I'm really conscious about my plastic consumption. And when I'm buying products from the shop, when I'm shopping, even the bags that I use to shop, I make sure that they are not plastic and I'm using the same, I'm reusing items. So that's one. I know you mentioned plastic, so I just want to add an extra one. The second thing is that I try as much as possible not to fly. So, and I think I'm just a bit fortunate to be living in Europe, where it's possible to use trains. And I know this is not an opportunity that a lot of other specifically developing countries have, but as much as possible, I try not to fly. Unfortunately, I had to fly to Egypt because there were no other options. But when it is possible that I can go with train, I do that.
Good. Oliver, one thing,
Yes,
and you cannot repeat what they have said.
I can't.
So it's getting
Well,
tougher for you.
I can just
So we
say.
said EVs, recycle, and we also not using plastic in our events.
Well, first of all, I can say I don't have a car, so that's already a step up from the electric car. Yeah, I just have a bike, but that's because I live in a small beach town called Dahab, where really having a bike is all you need. But I think otherwise a very small change that I've implemented since last year is really reduce my red meat consumption. And this is something that we all can do because, you know, it takes so much water to produce a kilogram of meat. And I'm not a vegetarian, not vegan by any means, but, you know, when people come to me and they say, oh, well, do we have to go from 0 to 100, you know, when it comes to changing our lifestyles? I always say, no, you can make a change through very small changes in your daily life. And for me, that's reducing my meat consumption.
Good. So these are very important for habits: EVs, recycling, no plastic consumption in events and gatherings, and also reducing red meat consumption. So I'm getting some looks that we're running ahead of time, but I'm going to do a political question, I'm going to do a personal question, and I'm going to try to do very fast a call to action on a very important issue for the world on climate action. So I want you to be as precise as you can be. This is very, it can sound political, but I want to put it because you're young leaders and you expect a lot from world leaders. So if you had President Biden and President Xi Jinping sitting here, and there were one thing that you could ask them to do, one thing, what would that one thing be? And I'll start with you, Oliver.
Provide more finances to climate change and take action now, because the money is there, but you do not prioritize it enough. You care more about the economy, the private sector, but you do not care enough about the environment. If you did, then we would see a lot more financial assets flowing into the right direction.
Fami, one thing.
Collaborate and cooperate the same way you did to get the word out of COVID, to get the word out of the climate crisis. If those two countries cooperated together, they can lead the word and lead the other countries to get it out of the climate crisis. That's it.
Mavis.
Mine is simple. Set fossil fuels, face our targets. We do not need fossil fuels, and we know that is the cause of the biggest emissions and the reason why the world is heading where we are heading. So I would just, as simple as possible, courageous enough and set up fossil fuel targets for your countries.
Sharouk.
Well, I would say that we have an abundance of international policies and strategies. What we actually need is tangible actions on ground, especially in developing countries where climate crisis is hitting the most.
I think those responses, the 4 responses are great. So let me ask you a personal question. Because a lot of young leaders have asked me, why don't you ask them what made an influence? What drove them to become such powerful leaders at such a young age? So I'll ask 2 questions in one. Tell me about one person that influenced you directly for being the leader that you are today on climate. And the second thing, if you were to recommend a book, a movie, a song, or our experience that has also shaped your views on climate change, what would that be to be shared with the world? So I'll begin with you, Fami.
Maybe a person, I don't know whether people will be familiar with him or not, but he's called Ahmad al-Shuqairi. He's an influencer from Saudi Arabia, and he has done a lot of movie series over YouTube and TV to speak about the words innovation for being kind to the people and to the nature. So he was my educator for everything.
Say the name again, because
Ahmad al-Shuqairi.
Okay, so I'll ask a good friend from the production and from One Young World to share that part with the rest of the One Young World community.
Yes, exactly. Regarding books, I'm not a good reader of books, to be honest, but
Can be a movie, can be a podcast, something that you believe can also be shared that has impacted you as a climate change activist?
To be honest, the most movie that I'm getting impacted by, but it's not related to the environment, is The Accountant by Ben Affleck. It's really very capitalistic and think.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. But really, this is my favorite movie. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with the environment, though.
we have to pay taxes in Colombia pretty soon, so we might have the accountant being called.
Yeah.
Shahrukh, one person that has influenced you and one recommendation that you want to share, a book, a movie, a song that has also impacted you in your reflections on climate.
Well, it's very hard for me to pick one person because the people who usually motivates me are my family, and they try to push me to get always the best out of anything that I work in. So what influenced me to stay in the climate change activism in the world and in my country is that I kind of I like to be close to people, and I like to be close to the local community, and this is what motivates me. About movies and books, I don't actually read a lot. I'm more of I like the technical part of the thing. I like to read a lot about the science behind everything. Just a general thing I could say here is that for people to follow what they are passionate about, not what others make them think they love or like.
Good. Oliver, one
Ye-
person, one recommendation.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Shrouk. Actually, it's my parents, as cheesy as it may be, but both my father and my mother have.
I'm a parent, and I don't want to be called cheesy any moment in time. Huh?
Well, I guess it's just the thing that probably a lot of young people might think about, but for me, I've always looked up to my parents so much, and that doesn't just go with regards to, now my activism with regards to environmental issues, but my father is a geologist, and he spent most of his life in sub-Saharan Africa, and my mother is a German and French teacher in Cairo. She's been based there for the last 14 years. And so they've instilled a lot of the global values, actually, not just, what does it mean to take care of our planet, but what does it mean to be a part of humanity, because they've allowed me to travel, they've allowed me to get in touch with people from around the world, and without their experiences and, of course, their educational values, I definitely wouldn't be sitting here. When it comes to, what inspired me, I would actually say it was a fellowship that I recently undertook at the beginning of this year called GPOTS, which stands for Global Diplomacy, Policy and Sustainability Fellowship. It's a new fellowship that was created by now two very well-known environmental and social scientists in India, and that brings together young people from around the world for an online fellowship of 3 to 4 months, focusing on the areas that I've just mentioned, bringing together as well experts in the field. So we were able to speak to people from the sustainability sector, from the diplomacy sector, as well as the political sector. And we realized, I saw firsthand how all of these sectors were combined and how they interconnect, because we can no longer just differentiate between the environment and diplomacy and sustainability, etc. These are all part of the same value chain.
Good. Mavis.
So someone who inspires me, I think I'm really privileged to work with one of the best climate scientists, Bill Hare, that I work with every single day. And he's been one of the veterans of COP. For example, he's attended every single COP from COP 1 to COP 27, and he's a fearless fighter for climate solutions. And so I'm really privileged to work with him every day. That is where I get my daily inspiration from. Regarding a book, I think I'll suggest a documentary that I watch on Netflix, Don't Look Up. I don't know if anybody else has watched that.
Why? What do you take out of it? Because I heard a lot of people talking about that.
I think it gives us some view into the future, like how it's going to look like if we don't act. what is going to happen, and it shows how the powerful people, like politicians, business leaders who have the money, think they can escape. But actually, nobody can escape the crisis, because you can go to another planet and then you die there because you think there's another planet B. And I think it gives that perspective, and it helps you to understand that this is something that we need to act on, because there's nowhere else for anyone to go. Even if you're the president of the United States or you are Jeff Bezos, where you have all of the money. So that's why I like that documentary. So I really recommend for everyone to watch.
Good. So since we're running, basically this can be the last question, and I'm enjoying this role as the panelist anchor with such an amazing group. I'm going to talk about one thing that is doing a lot of damage to the world climate. The second largest trigger of emissions in the world is deforestation. If deforestation were a country, it will be the third largest country in emissions, and it represents today 20% of all emissions in the world. And even if the world decided to shut down all the fossil fuel consumption capacity today, we'll still be lagging to meet the target towards 2030 and towards 2050. That means we have to do a lot on deforestation. So I want you to think, how can you, through the One Young World community, trigger a more dynamic action from the youth around the world to raise the attention on facing deforestation, as maybe vis-a-vis with fossil fuels, the two main causes of greenhouse gases emissions in the world. So in this, I'm going to allow, who wants to go first? Sharuk, there you go. And I'll go.
I would say that through One Young World, we can definitely reach out to all the young people around the world and raise this issue, starting from building awareness around it, starting from giving the youth access so they can actually understand the how large is this issue is, and how big it is, and how it's affecting the world. And from there we start building this knowledge, starting for each young people to take ownership. Like, yes, I need to build awareness around it. I need to get decision makers to act around this issue. So I would say this would be like the first thing, build awareness around it, and build this momentum just to get this issue on a global level.
Good. Mavis.
And to add to that, once young people are aware, I think we also know where power lies with the people, and we've seen what happens when young people go onto the street and demand governments to act. So I would say that is another way we can do this as young people, to make sure we are keeping governments on their toes and pushing them to implement the policies that we need to stop the deforestation that is happening. The second thing, also as consumers, being conscious of what we buy, because the trees are being cut to do something, to produce something. So when you're buying something, do you know what's the source of that? We should buy sustainable or certified product. And I think if we are able to block it from the demand side, and there's no need for cutting trees, because nobody's going to buy what you're going to use the trees to produce anyways. This is one way that we can indirectly also through our activism stop deforestation.
Fami, from a business standpoint, think of a possible solution, but something that can also be done jointly with One Young World, with the One Young World plan.
Yeah, looking at the root causes of deforestation, you can conclude that, for example, energy activities, food growing activities, and maybe material activities for having furniture and stuff. So if there is an immediate introduction of alternatives and solutions from the entrepreneurial perspective to have alternative materials and better renewable energy generation, not necessarily relying on wood, and also efficient utilization of agriculture crops and agricultural land, I think this is a collective action that could be, I think there is the One Young World Action Accelerator, which could be supporting such momentum. And I think solving this from a disruptive point of view can contribute effectively to the reduction of deforestation rates, and hopefully at a certain day reaching zero.
Oliver, so I think we've heard a lot. What kind of action, but also I want to get your idea whether the carbon markets are very important, useful tools also to contribute to fight, for example, deforestation in Africa. This week we launched the Africa Carbon Market Initiative, and there's a lot of conservation that needs to get done and get resources for the communities. So since you're the lawyer, I can put a little bit more of a legal umbrella in the question to you.
Sure. I first of all, just in addition to what my friends have said, I think it's very important also to check our supply chains. I think it's very important that One Young World as an organization also reflects on their business partners, where they source, all the materials that they need, what venues they use, etc. Because very often, even if an organization has very honorable and lofty goals, it's further down the supply chain when we realize that there are a lot of amendments that need to be made. And well, when it comes to the law, I actually my suggestion was more to see One Young World stepping up as a forum for young people to demand action from their local MPs, because I actually think this is the most important message, that young people can be change makers in their communities if they put the right pressure on people. I actually believe we are a lot stronger when we act together as one team rather than as lots of separate teams. So I would love to see One Young World stepping up and bringing all of us, this incredible network of thousands of young people by now, together and have an impact on both local and international politicians that they can no longer ignore, because very often, sadly, I see young people being ignored at the world stage.
Well, those are brilliant responses, and since we ran out of time, I want to wrap up by saying a couple of things. First of all, I want to express my gratitude to David and Carmen that have organized this gathering. Thank you so much. From a distance, I want to express my gratitude to Kate, and I know how she has been the driver also of One Young World, and I have to say that I'm here not as a former president, but maybe as the husband of one of the One Young World ambassadors, because my wife, Maria Juliana, was a very active participant in the Manchester meeting, and she was a force behind all our youth strategy in Colombia. And we talked a lot about youth empowerment, and I'm so happy to see so many Colombian representatives today here at the COP, and I feel proud about you, and I think we all do. And I have to say that it has been enlightening for me to chair this panel with you. I've enjoyed so much the conversation that we had previously and also this conversation. And you might say I switched some of the questions, but because I didn't want to ask them twice. I just wanted to get your thoughts, your heart, your vision, your minds on how can you continue influencing people. Mavis, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for your great devotion also to connect science and social action. And I want to also thank you, Oliver, because I know you're starting a new life and you have a lot of expectations, but I think your background and what you have done is also important, and we want to see you participating actively in how do we protect the climate migrants. When I was president, I had the possibility to work with migrants coming from Venezuela, and there were more than 1.8 million Venezuelans that came to Colombia. There are more than 6 million Venezuelans deployed all over the world, but people don't imagine what climate migration is going to look like in the upcoming years, and we have to start thinking on solutions. Otherwise, we don't want to see xenophobia, we don't want to see indifference, we don't want to see a negative reaction. We have to be inclusive. So thank you for having that purpose in your mind. Shahrukh, thank you so much, and I really want to be able at some point to also see closely the work that you're doing in Jordan, and I look forward for that. And the passion that you have for your country and your people, and how you want to engage them in climate action, really demonstrates your conviction. And Fami, you're a perseverant young entrepreneur who has that climate vision. We want to see more businesses in the world that, since the beginning, they have that mantra. And I think you have shown the case not only of how you persevered to get here, but how the solutions that you're thinking can be market-driven, nature-based solutions, which are two concepts that have to be in the table. So saying that, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a privilege and an honor. I just invite you to give a big round of applause to this incredible group of young leaders. Thank you so much.